getting personal very quickly. So when those clips and those quotes started getting reposted and discussed again, the reaction online was immediate. Fans were saying, hold on, this was never just about a list or some ranking. This was ego, respect, legacy, and image, all colliding in front of everybody. And when men in this industry feel like their name is being played with publicly, especially in a culture where reputation is currency, the temperature rises fast. People close to the culture were allegedly saying the real issue was not just what was said, but who said it and where it was said. Because one thing about public platforms, whether it is radio, podcasts, interviews, or social media, once your words leave your mouth, they do not belong to you anymore. They belong to the internet. And the internet loves turning one careless comment into a full-blown humiliation campaign. That is why fans say the alleged confrontation that followed became bigger than the original comment itself. Because in the retelling of this story, 50 did not let it stay as some quiet behind-the-scenes annoyance. According to all the talk online, he wanted energy to be matched face-to-face. And that is what always gives these moments their extra edge. It's not just that he allegedly gets upset, it's that people say he wants the discomfort to be felt in real time. And that is what has fans so fascinated with his whole image to this day, because whether people love him, fear him, or are completely exhausted by him, they all seem to agree on one thing: he does not move like someone who wants peace more than he wants the last word. One fan on social media summed it up in a way that really captures why these stories keep exploding. They wrote, "The problem with 50 is he never wants to just win. He wants the other person to look crazy while he wins." And honestly, that one line explains almost everything, because it's never enough for the other person to simply apologize, backtrack, or try to smooth things over. By the time the machine gets going, fans are already waiting to see how ugly the public fallout is going to get. And once people started revisiting those old industry moments, the internet did what it always does. It started pulling up receipts, connecting patterns, and asking the bigger question: how many times has this actually happened? How many people thought they were just saying something harmless, only to find themselves dragged into a whole new chapter of 50's revenge catalog? And that is where things really started escalating, because the moment fans began revisiting one story, they immediately jumped to another name that always sends social media into chaos whenever it gets mentioned alongside his: Vivica Fox. And let's be honest, anytime exes get involved, the drama automatically gets 10 times worse. Because industry beef is one thing, but once old romance, bruised egos, and unresolved bitterness enter the picture, emotions run high in a completely different way. Fans are shocked every single time this chapter gets brought up, because what makes it so messy is not just the public back and forth, it's the feeling that there was always something unfinished sitting under the surface. For years, people have treated that old relationship like a pop culture time capsule. Two huge personalities, a flashy public romance, and then a breakup that never really seemed to cool all the way down. And whenever that story gets mentioned, fans immediately start arguing over the same question: was it ever truly over emotionally, or did both sides just get better at hiding the resentment until one of them finally snapped again? Because according to how this whole thing has been discussed online, what made that situation explode was not simply a joke or a random shady remark. It was the kind of comment that attacks identity, pride, and image all at once. And if there is one thing 50 supporters always say, it's that he can take a lot of things, but once you try to publicly frame him in a way that makes him feel exposed or embarrassed, all bets are off. That is why so many people still talk about this moment like it was a turning point. Because when an ex speaks on you publicly, especially in a way that gets the room reacting, it creates a different kind of sting. It's not just internet drama anymore. It feels intimate, it feels humiliating, and most importantly, it feels like somebody who once knew you personally is now using that closeness as a weapon. And that kind of disrespect always lands harder. Fans were saying the tension in that whole situation was obvious, because it was not just about one interview or one clapback. Was about years of little jabs, unspoken bitterness, and the kind of unresolved energy that only comes from two people who once shared private space, but can now barely share public air with sparks flying. One fan posted, "When an ex embarrasses you in public, you don't hear the joke the same way everybody else does. You hear the history behind it." And honestly, that is exactly why this whole chapter still feels so explosive whenever people bring it back up. Because once that line was crossed, the internet did what it always does. It stopped treating it like celebrity gossip and started turning it into sides. Suddenly, women were saying he had it coming. Men were saying she took it too far. Blogs were clipping every reaction. Comment sections were turning into battlegrounds. And what started as one messy exchange became one of those cultural moments that fans still reference years later whenever the topic of never disrespect 50 publicly comes up. And in the middle of all that chaos, one thing became painfully obvious. Once personal feelings mix with public embarrassment, nobody involved really walks away clean. Because even when the joke lands, even when the room laughs, even when the audience thinks they are just watching entertainment, there is almost always a second layer happening underneath. Pride gets wounded, old resentment gets stirred up, private pain gets dressed up as public comedy, and by the time everybody realizes how deep the cut actually was, the damage is already done. That is what makes these moments feel bigger than ordinary celebrity mess. They are never just isolated incidents. They are emotional detonations with years of unresolved tension packed inside them. And the family was left divided, the fan base was split, and the internet kept feeding the fire, because every time people thought the smoke had cleared, another old clip, another old quote, or another old insult would come floating right back to the surface. And once fans started reliving all of that, the conversation moved into an even uglier direction, because if public embarrassment over words is bad, according to the reports and all the online reactions, things got much nastier once money entered the picture. Because if there's one thing people say 50 takes even more seriously than disrespect, it is feeling played financially. And once that line gets crossed, the gloves usually come off. Because money changes the temperature of everything. When somebody talks crazy, that's one kind of insult. But when somebody allegedly smiles in your face, does business with you, benefits from your name, and then leaves you feeling like you got finessed, fans say that's when 50's whole energy shifts from petty to surgical. And that is exactly why the Randall Emmett chapter always gets dragged back into these conversations whenever people start listing the moments where things got ugly fast. Because according to the reports and all the online retelling, fans did not see that situation as simple business fallout. They saw it as the perfect example of what happens when 50 believes somebody has mixed debt with debt. And in celebrity culture, that combination is deadly, because the internet can forgive a bad deal. It can even forgive a messy breakup. But the second a story starts sounding like one person allegedly thought they could use another person's brand, status, or loyalty while quietly moving funny behind the scenes, social media immediately turns it into a character issue. And once fans frame something as character, not just conflict, the person in the hot seat usually has no control over how ugly it gets after that. People online were saying that what made this situation hit so hard was how public it became so fast, because most people, especially in entertainment, would try to keep a money dispute hidden behind lawyers, managers, private calls, and carefully worded statements. But that's not the version of these stories fans say they associate with 50. They say he doesn't always believe in quiet correction. He believes in pressure. And pressure is exactly what the internet claimed showed up here. One fan posted, 50 doesn't chase you in private if he feels like you disrespected him in public. He drags you where everybody can see. And honestly, that line explains why these moments keep becoming content in themselves. Because once a disagreement becomes public spectacle, it stops being just between two people. Now it belongs to the blogs, the reactions, the memes, the commentary channels, the podcasts, and every fan page waiting for the next screenshot to drop. And that's where the emotional humiliation becomes just as